As the Allies drove through Western Europe and France, they had one thing in mind: re-securing the sovereignty of the French nation. They knew to do this, they had to strike Paris. Yes guys, today we are talking about the liberation of Paris. This was a defining moment in the Second World War, marking the end of Nazi occupation in the city and beginning its liberation. The event was not only significant in terms of the impact it had on the war, but also in terms of the impact it had on the people of Paris and France. In this video, we will explore the background, events, and aftermath of the liberation of Paris and why it remains a momentous day in history. But before we get into it, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to see more historical content just like this one. Now, World War II was a global conflict that lasted from 1939 to 1945 and involved many of the world's nations. The war was fought between the Axis powers led by Germany, Italy and Japan, and the Allied powers led by the United Kingdom, France and the Soviet Union, as well as the United States. The war had a profound impact on the world and shaped the course of history for decades to come. The city of Paris was a symbol of freedom and artistic expression, and its liberation was a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of adversity. The events leading up to the liberation of Paris were complex and multi-faced. At the outset of World War II, France was one of the main players in the Allied forces. However, despite their best efforts, the German army was able to quickly invade and conquer France, leading to the fall of the French government and the establishment of a German occupation. The German occupation of Paris was seen as a symbol of their victory over France and a demonstration of their power in Europe. The city was heavily guarded and the German army imposed strict control over the population, with curfews, rationing and other restrictions being put in place. The people of Paris lived in fear of being arrested or executed for even the slightest infraction. Despite the oppression, resistance against the German occupation grew in France. Resistance movements were formed and the Free French forces, led by Charles de Gaulle, continued to fight against the Germans. However, the Allies were still struggling to gain ground in Europe, and it seemed as if the liberation of Paris would be a long way off. However, in July of 1944, this was all to change. The Allies launched Operation Overlord, which was the invasion of Normandy. This was a turning point in the war, as it marked the beginning of the Allies pushing back the Germans. For the French people, Paris was more than just a city. It was a symbol of their national identity and culture. The occupation of Paris by the Germans was a blow to the French people's sense of pride and independence. It was a constant reminder of their defeat and the loss of their sovereignty. For the Allies, liberating Paris was a crucial step in their efforts to free Europe from Nazi control. It would demonstrate to the world their strength and determination to defeat the enemy. It would also help to boost the morale of the French people and increase their involvement in the resistance movement against the German occupation. The liberation of Paris was a result of many factors, both political and military. The Allies had been gradually pushing the Germans back across Europe and were closing in on France. The French resistance, a group of brave men and women who had been working underground to resist the German occupation, had been growing in strength silently. They had sabotaged German communications, gathered intelligence, and carried out acts of sabotage and assassinations. On August 19, 1944, the Allies launched a major offensive to liberate the city from German occupational forces. The battle was the result of months of planning, and preparation was designed to take advantage of the weakened state of the German army after the D-Day landings in Normandy. The start of the Allied offensive was marked by a massive air bombardment of the city by the Allied forces. The German occupation forces were caught off guard and quickly put on the defence. Despite the initial shock, they quickly regrouped and put up a fierce resistance, determined to hold the city at all costs. The response of the German military was categorised by a mix of desperation and determination. The German army was stretched very thin, with troops and resources stretched across the fronts in Europe. Despite this, they were determined to defend the city and maintain their hold over the occupied territories. The initial stages of the battle were marked by intense fighting in the streets. The Germans used their superior training and experience to hold off the Allied forces, who were still inexperienced in street-to-street fighting. The Allies were also hampered by the narrow, winding streets of the city, which made it difficult for their armoured vehicles and tanks to manoeuvre. As the Allies approached Paris, the German commander of the city, General von Choltitz, was ordered by Hitler to destroy the city rather than to let it fall into Allied hands. However, von Choltitz chose to ignore this order and instead surrendered the city to the Allies on the 25th of August 1944. The liberation of Paris was a turning point in the war, both militarily and politically, and marked the start of the Allies' march towards victory. The events of the liberation of Paris marked the end of 4 years of German occupation and marked the start of France's journey towards rebuilding and recovery. The impact of the liberation was both far-reaching in terms of its effect on the war and its legacy in history. This was a very significant victory for the Allies, who had been pushing back the Germans on various fronts in Europe. It was seen as a crucial step towards the eventual defeat of the Germans and the end of the war in Europe. The liberation also provided the Allies with a valuable morale boost, as they had now succeeded in freeing one of Europe's most iconic cities from the Nazi occupation. This was also an imperative milestone in terms of France as a whole. The city was the seat of the French government, and the liberation of Paris was seen as a symbol of the French people's determination to reclaim their country and restore their independence. The French government was able to re-establish itself and begin the process of rebuilding the country. The liberation of Paris remains one of the defining moments of the Second World War, and its legacy is still felt today. The city's liberation was seen as a symbol of the eventual triumph of the Allies over the Germans, and it was a source of pride and inspiration for people around the world. The liberation also had a lasting impact on the city itself. The events helped to define Paris's identity as a city of resistance and resilience, and they remain an important part of the city's cultural heritage to this day. The liberation also marked the start of a new chapter in the city's history, as it began to recover from the war. The battle to liberate Paris was a significant moment in the war, and the events leading up to it are a testament to the resilience, bravery, and determination of the Allied forces. It is important to remember and honour the sacrifices of those who fought in the liberation of Paris. Thousands of soldiers and civilians lost their lives in the pursuit of freedom, and their sacrifices should never be forgotten. The bravery of these individuals has inspired future generations and remains a source of pride for the French people. The liberation of the city was seen as a symbol of hope for the Allies, providing a much-needed boost to their morale and momentum. It was also a key turning point in the war, as the liberation of Paris paved the way for the eventual defeat of Nazi Germany. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support will be greatly appreciated. Have a great day, guys.